So for Human Design Catalyst, March 25th, 2024, what we basically are going to be looking at is two ways of arriving at the fifth line. One is going to be the formulas of the lines, because there are formulas, first line, second line, third line. Like, how do we kind of arrive at what the fifth line is actually doing in the context of the hexagram, right? Because there's 6 kind of things you can do, right? And the fifth line is one of those 6 things. And then the second would just be hearing any experiences either of you have had, or I can share experiences. I was just kind of mentioning about how in the talk at this last HDC with Anhad Singh, Singh went into being a 5-1 and how there's a lot of techniques and kind of things you can do to distract from getting overly scrutinized, because really you work best when you don't have a lot of scrutiny into what you're doing. And so it's almost like give people something to talk about or give them something else. I actually thought of how at each year at Burning Man, they'll make all these fake, announcements that everybody hates, and that will take away scrutiny from the changes they make. So it's like this cloud of deception. So there is something about, smoke and mirrors, And then also there's something unique about the 5-1, and all 3 of us are 5-1s. There's something unique about the 5-1 among the profiles that carry the fifth line. And that's that the 5-1 is the only of those 4 profiles that carries the first line. And the first line could be described as the most invisible line, almost like it doesn't exist. So when you have a fifth line in combination with any other line, that person is a lot more visible, meaning that person, they're seeing the second line there, or they're seeing the third line there. But when you have it in combination with the first line, it's somebody who can be very discreet and very behind the scenes and kind of in the shadows, and actually operates best that way until it's time to present themselves. Ra always used to say, help someone and then leave, get out of their aura. He was also a manifester, which I think, being a 5-1 manifester, there's a nice simpatico between the role of helping people practically, the fifth line, and then manifester, being able to kind of have your impact and leave. Being a 5-1 generator or 5-1 manifesting generator, there's more of an on-call nature, which is a little tricky with the fifth line, because the fifth line works best really saving the day. So I think to begin with, I just like to start with the formula of how to arrive at the fifth line, what the fifth line even is. And Ra gives us the formula. He gives us gate 64, which is a hexagram that goes alternating yin and yang. And as it goes up with alternating yin and yang, so it basically goes yin at the first line, yang is the second line, and so on, alternating up. He basically says this is the fundamental quality of the lines. And so this means that the fifth line has a fundamentally yin quality. It also means that the 5-1 is double yin. It's a completely yin profile, meaning that really, if you compare it to the yang profiles, that it's meant to adapt and adjust and take the shape of and the form of what is called for or needed in that crisis. So that the fifth line has to be very flexible, and so does the first line. They have to learn in a yin way, flexibly, adapting to what the actual world needs and has, and so on, and all of these things. It's not like just showing up and saying, this is what I have and this is what I'm going to do. Now, every double yin profile has its opposite, which is double yang, and that's the 2-4. If you look at the structure of the hexagram, where you count from the bottom, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you can see that it's 2 trigrams, the 1 to the 3 and then the 4 to the 6. Well, what this means is the 1 and the 4 are harmonic, the 2 and the 5, and the 3 and the 6. So anytime you have a profile, there's actually an opposite profile, that is its harmonic profile. And this is true for all 12 profiles. So all of us being 5-1s, our opposite is the 2-4.
Interesting.
And if you know 2-4,
My son is a 2-4.
So there you go. So you have a very harmonic relationship with your son, but you're the double yin and he's the double yang.
Interesting.
And so what you'll notice is that the second line and the fourth line are both the yang approaches to what you could call the problem of each line, which really is the problem of its quality. And this is something that Ra touches on when he says that the first line has a fixed quality and the third line has a mutable, or he doesn't use the word mutable, but he says changeable quality, which in astrology we would say is mutable, like the mutable signs.
Right.
It's made to also adapt in a way. So even though I was saying the yin is one form of being adaptable, some of these concepts kind of reproduce because then you get into an interesting area where there's like a yang mutable or a yin fixed, right? And what are these? And actually, if you know the profiles, they make a lot of sense. And this is how you can kind of arrive at the profiles by formula. And this is more advanced, right? Because this is basically, say you didn't even know any of the qualities of the profiles at all. How would you then reconstruct them? Like you didn't have Ra telling you anything about any of the profiles at all. All you have is the formula. Okay, so we start with the first line. The first line is fixed. And the first line is fixed in yin. The second line is cardinal, or, more kind of, I guess we would call it cardinal, starting things off really good at what Ra calls projecting themselves out there. He uses the term projection to mean both projecting oneself out there, like an image of oneself, as well as being projected on in the psychological sense, or even both, that they kind of project a larger-than-life image that is easy for people to imagine all sorts of projections about. It's easy to make up stories about a larger-than-life kind of person because they have more of a archetypal quality to them or something like that, right? So in any case, the second line is the first example of this projection field, or this projecting quality. And I would call it a cardinal quality. That's not a term that Ra uses. That's a term from astrology, Aries, and so on. But the cardinality of the second line and the fifth line, I think, and also because it's the only other option. When you have the first line is fixed, the third line is mutable. And the same structure reproduces in the upper trigram, meaning that the first and fourth line are fixed. The second and fifth are the cardinal that deal with the projections. And then the third and the sixth are mutable or changeable. And each one is one of the possible permutations of the yin or the yang version of it. So it's really beautiful. You get yin and yang fixed, yin and yang mutable, yin and yang cardinal. And so you really get to see as 5-1s, because every profile, it's going to be limited in some ways. It's not going to have everything. What we lack is mutable. So we have fixed and we have cardinal. But we're fully yin. So how do you kind of interpret this from formula, right? Is that our first line, the fixed quality of us, takes a really long time to build its foundation and is very slow and deliberate and methodical to build what it knows. It's also yin. The first line goes in and it says, I want to learn. Who's a teacher? I'm very humble. I'm a humble student. I know nothing. So the first line is very much starting from the place of yin, the place of humility, and the place of absolute beginner, novice mind, whatever you want to call it. By the time you get to the fourth line, which is the fixed yang, these are people who say, I have the answer, here it is, I'm going to sell it to you, and they're very fixed in selling it to you. And so your son, being a 2-4, carries that unconsciously. He will have a natural knack for externalizing and even influencing other people through that fixed externalization of the fourth line. But again, we're arriving at the fifth line by formula, so you can see how, this is one approach, right? How do you arrive at it? Now you go to the second line, and you see that the second line is the first attempt to do what the fifth line does. It's the yang attempt to project. And it basically says, here I am, and I've got the answer, and here it is, right? And they call them paper tigers because a lot of times the second line can get ripped to shreds because somebody comes and goes, you don't have the answer. And then they're like, but I do. And then, well, no, you don't. And then they have an Achilles heel. There's this whole thing about the second line having this weak spot where the whole thing kind of crumbles and it falls apart, and they're kind of basically, there's a negative projection field that, wow, they could have done so much more. Like they could have or should have done so much more. And so it's actually the opposite of the fifth line in that sense. The fifth line is the yin that's like waiting to kind of help. The second line is the yang going, here I am, I'm ready to help. Or like not totally disrespecting the timing of the world and the timing of anything. The second line is like, I'm God's gift, here I am, like, let's do it. And it's this yang attitude. Now we need them too. I mean, Carl Jung was a 2-4. I mean, there's some great 2-4s out there. Van is a 2-4. Each profile has its way in the world, and the 2-4 way is to be totally natural and unabashedly themselves, ideally, and in this very yang cardinal fixed way of just saying, I'm just me doing my thing in the world, and they're not here to change and be changed by people. They're not here to be mutable and adapt to things. They're just here to be, I'm double yang, I'm unyielding in any way, shape, or form. I am fixed in my externalization, and I am fixed in and I'm kind of cardinal, I guess, meaning I'm here to start and do my thing in that way. Now, you get to us, we are the opposite kind. Like, we're cardinal. We're like, yeah, we'll start something, and we're also fixed in that, yeah, we're first line, we'll learn, and it takes us a long time. But because of the double yin, we're almost like at the service of, we're like receptive to what the era needs, and we're at the service of being called to crisis to save the day and kind of do what's needed of us. It's less about us being in our right angle, me story, double yang, here I am just being myself in the world, unyielding, unchanging, unflinching. We are more like on the other side of it, we're like, no, we're here to be receptive to the world. We're here to be open to the world. So that's just, you can see how each of the combinations, and then of course the third lines and the sixth lines, those are the two ways that you can be adaptable or changeable. And that's the yin and the yang way that you can basically do that. And that's also a funny one where it's almost like, how do you deconstruct that? Like, yin and yang changeable, right? But the way I understand it is this. If you know third lines, you'll know that the third line personality in particular that's the yin changeable. They're here to adapt and to continually change themselves and their strategies and their approaches and their way of doing things. They're basically to be like, I made a mistake, I'm going to change now and not make that mistake again. I'm going to do it a different way. So I'm going to be yin and changeable and receptive about changing myself. But then you go to the sixth line, and the keynote there is transition, and those are the yang mutable. And they're also changeable, but they're yang, and they're kind of known for being role models, especially when they're in their 50s, and they can kind of be beyond it all or above it all, or somehow just, I mean, we have our dear guest, Nancy here, is a 6-2, although not in that flowering phase. But you even see in their 30s the incredible, like when they're kind of on their stage, this roof phase, their incredible objectivity, all of these great sixth line qualities. And so you might say, how are they changeable? It seems like part of being a role model is not being changeable at all. Well, they're not changing themselves. Again, they're yang. They're unyielding. They're not receptive to, oh, I did it the wrong way, I'll try it a different way. They're not about changing themselves. So what are they doing? What is this yang changeable? Well, they're here to basically be unyielding and yang and kind of firm in their embrace of change and transition, and approaching how they approach others with an almost seemingly hypocritical approach where they give one person one advice and give the other the exact opposite advice. But it's not that they themselves have changed, the sixth line, it's that they're just trying a different approach. This person's really worried and they're trying to get him to relax. That person is like really complacent and they're trying to kind of put a little fire under him and get him going. And so the sixth line is like changeable, but they themselves are the role model who isn't, they themselves aren't really changing. They're just changing what approach they use with different people because they're so like wide in their way of approaching. So that's how again, it takes some work, but you can kind of deconstruct, what does it mean to be yin versus yang fixed? What does it mean to be yin versus yang cardinal? What does it mean to be yin versus yang mutable? And so that's kind of the short version of this way of reconstructing the lines. And from there we arrive at, okay, by the time you get to the fifth line, you have this cardinal quality, the only cardinal quality there is besides the second line. And the second line, it was kind of all about them. The second line is the right angle. They were kind of just yang about it and saying, this is me and I'm here to just kind of make my mark in the world, but it's really just about them. Now, again, that's not to knock them. Carl Jung was a 2-4 who did the most incredible work, pioneering the whole psychology as a side effect of his natural brilliance. And so you can see that there's something great about that unyielding yang quality too, that Jung wasn't looking for what other people said needed to be done or any of that. He wasn't joining in solving the crises of the world the way a fifth line would. He was doing his thing, and he was selfish with his time and taking long walks in the garden, being a natural and enjoying himself and just living his life. And there's something really beautiful about that. The fifth line can be so preoccupied with other people's lives that sometimes it's like we don't exist for ourselves as much. So, and that's part of what we quote unquote signed up for as left angle. There's nothing wrong with that. That's the same is true for the sixth lines.
Is that transpersonal?
Exactly. So it's not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just kind of a fact that the 2-4 is really here to be like, here I am, here's what I'm doing, and sometimes it has an amazing contribution to humanity. That's great. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes they just do their own thing. But I mean, they're just here to be naturals in that. The fifth line is really here to be, as a conscious personality, to save the day, to come in and save the day. And so that's where it's the second projection field. It's like all the people first heard about some second line who said they could save the day and didn't. And then so they're all skeptical anyway. And then they hear about this new person who might be able to save the day who comes along, the fifth line. And so they kind of come in with high hopes. Mm-hmm. And so that's why the second line projection field is almost, you don't expect a lot from them. And then you're really overjoyed and like relieved when they like over deliver in every way. Because there's a little bit of a negative projection field, a little bit of, wow, they're so brilliant. If only they did more. Like even Jung, like he was so brilliant. If only he were able to put his thoughts into a way that were able to reach more people or something. There's always like this if only kind of attached to it. Whereas for the fifth line, it's the opposite. It's here they are, perfect, they're going to save the day. But then there's disappointment if that expectation isn't fulfilled. And so that's why there's a real danger of the fifth line when they've basically even just allowing the other to build the projection around them. It's kind of like you don't even really consent to being projected on. You just end up around that other person. And the longer you stay with them, the more the field snowballs in some way. So the only real thing you can blame yourself for is not nipping it in the bud earlier or not delivering something practical and then getting out. Because it's almost like there's some punctuation point where you can kind of punctuate your interaction with the person by giving them something useful. And then once they're satisfied with the useful thing, it's actually in their best interest for you to leave. Because if you hang out, they're going to try to imagine more things that you might be able to help them with, and they're not even going to really sit with the thing you gave them. The only thing the fifth line really gives people anyway are like something that's practical if you use it, if you do it. But people can almost be greedy with the fifth line. They could be like, great, you gave me one. Give me another one. Give me more. And they don't even look at the old one. They don't even do the old one because they're just excited for some new one, something, right? So I think it's actually in everyone's best interest for the fifth line to kind of give them something and then say, okay, no, let's give you, that's enough for this. Like that's what the problem really calls for. Also, because it has to be simple. If what the fifth line is giving isn't simple enough for them to actually use, then they're not going to use it, even if it works, right? So a huge part of it is you don't want to give them 8 things. You want to like be like, no, this is the most important thing right now. Don't even worry about that. Deal with that next time. The most important thing here is like, you kind of want to get to the bottom line or the most important thing to address quickly as a fifth line. And so that's part of this practicality, objectivity, kind of nonchalance even. The fifth line is kind of here to be a little nonchalant about it. Like the nonchalant fixer. Like if you think of a movie like Pulp Fiction, the fifth line would have been the fixer guy played by Harvey Keitel. Because he just shows up in a suit, he knows how to handle the crisis, there's a dead body, they got to get rid of it. He knows exactly what to do, he doesn't have any reaction, he's not like, he's just there's something about the fifth line where it's just all business, or it can seem that way. And of course, as fifth lines, we have personal lives and we have all this other stuff too. But part of the fifth line's, at least its collective persona, is the implacable general or the one who comes in and takes charge and kind of saves the day and stuff. So. Well, now I'd love to hear the experiential side, and you're also welcome to share if you have anything, Nancy, if you've had any ideas from those, the deconstruction of the lines, or if you have any observations about fifth line. But basically, I think it'd be good to get to the experiential. Now that we've looked at the logic, and for this part, I'll kind of hand it over because I've shared a lot of my stories already. I'd love to hear experiential side of the fifth line, and anything you'd like to share. Anyone would?
I hear a lot of fifth lines are kind of afraid of a projection field. They're afraid of being projected on in a negative light. But I kind of look at it as a force field of, well, if this person is projecting negative on me, I don't actually have to deal with them. They're not seeing me for who I am. So instead of trying to clear the projection field, I just allow them to look at me that way and kind of maintain more of a distance with that individual.
If you get the sense that they have some negative.
Yeah. If
How
it's
about
not,
really
if it's
positive
not
ones,
actual.
though?
Well, I mean, I'm just saying like.
Excuse me.
Positive ones, yeah, those are harder, of course.
I mean, same thing. If it's unrealistic.
Yeah, if it's unrealistic.
You're kind of monitoring their expectations of you, and it's actually very pleasing. You probably have this experience too as a fifth line. It's pleasing, to me anyway, when when I kind of sense that others have realistic expectations, whatever it is, whether I'm involved or not. I could be totally on the sidelines of a situation. There's an event coming up, a party, and somebody has either too low or too high of expectations. Too low, I'm not too worried about, because too low, I'm like, oh, they're going to be fine. They're going to have a blast. But too high of expectations, it's a little bit like, they could be disappointed here. And just, what can we do to just cushion this disappointment? Like, we're kind of very sensitive to others getting ready to be disappointed. We gotta see it happen in slow motion and like see the whole thing play out. And I think that's part of this being a fifth line, is just being aware of others and kind of being in touch with their expectations. And also that we have to realize there's a deep connection between people's expectations and what we kind of call in common parlance the spirit. Like the sense of like having your spirit crushed, or like, you know, some people just really had a terrible turn of events in life and they've been through the ringer and they really had their spirit crushed and they had all these expectations that weren't met in life and all these things. They're kind of related. And the other thing that we learn in human design is that matters of the spirit are actually also deeply related to the emotional center and to the experiential. And so interestingly enough, there's a kind of a deep point that the fifth line is here to have had an experience that they found valuable, be able to give that experience to someone else in a way that nourishes the other's spirit and gives them hope to just keep fighting, and just that gives them hope in humanity a little bit, because they're able to share in this experience. And it is very experiential. There was a really interesting point from Ra. He said that he had an experience with the voice. He could never transfer that experience. So he doesn't even try. Because for him to be a fifth line and get up there and say, I had an experience with a voice and this is why you should try this, he would be absolutely destroyed. So then it took him years of having his own experience of watching the transits and watching the moon and experiencing the auras. And then he can translate that and say, I'm going to give you the experience of being in touch with a part of yourself that you can trust. And I'm going to give you the experience of noticing the parts of you that are influenced through other people and transits and all of this, right? So he's giving you something experiential, but he's giving you the right experiential thing, the practical thing that you can actually use. Because if he just said, I had this experience with the voice, well, unless he can give me the hearing the voice too, I'm not going to believe him. He can't actually give me the experience. So he was like, be careful as a fifth line that you give people an experience that they can actually have. That you don't just say, I had it, you know, but you trust me, basically. No one's going to trust us. They're all paranoid. They need to be, it needs to be shown to them in some way. They need to believe it. They need to see it. They need to feel it themselves. And so there is some like deep connection between people who basically, I mean, everyone, the whole world is obviously struggling to maintain its spirit, but people who are sort of defeated in life, who have maybe given up, who come along and find the fifth line. And then what the fifth line is here to do is to give them some valuable experience, which once again gives them hope. And it could just be a little experience. I had an example of a friend who was a writer who grew up in Alabama and then moved to the big city. And he's not a fifth line. I am a fifth line, so he would kind of see me as this, not only a human being, but an epitome of an intellectual city writer type person. So then I would give him the experience of workshopping a short story and writing things and try to give him some practical tips I picked up and stuff. But you have to be really careful there, because all you can really give them is the practical experiences you yourself have had, which then he could work with on his own and sort of carry off. It's like Rock could give people human design, but he couldn't be their therapist.
Right.
He couldn't see them again after that and be like, so how's your experiment going? He was more just like, try this out, go with it, and here's what I can give you, and now try it yourself. But again, if they keep hanging out, you know, I'm friends with this person, it's like there's an extra kind of question of like, okay, well, besides these writing tips, you're also just a person, and it seems like actually you have a lot of the same problems other people have. It can actually burst some bubbles, and that can really be healthy for them. Like, we actually are probably being good for people when we help them, and good for them when we burst their bubbles. It's just a little bit of a, how much are we going to be the good cop or the bad cop in that situation?
Right. For me, as a counselor, one of the things I'm noticing and asking is, you had said, you know, the 5-1s are good in a crisis. And so when people come to see me, it is really good. But then if people linger, you know, I'm seeing someone for 2 years now, and it's good, it's fine, but there is that question of, you know, is it still beneficial? And part of it for me is, as a counselor, the whole reputation thing for the 5-1, because I need to have a positive reputation. And I haven't had anything negative, but somehow part of me, clients, it's like this wave, right? Like I'll get a bunch of clients and then I won't have any clients. And somehow I take it as being like, oh, I must be doing something wrong. I'm projecting something negative. I'm like, why aren't people coming towards me now? And there's this energy or this thought of, well, I have repelling energy and it must be my picture that they're seeing something. It's like, so I take it to this place of what paranoia.
Well,
Yes.
I think
Yes.
that's actually really healthy. And I think instead of making it a personal thing, like maybe there's something personal, realize that it's actually healthy to be in touch with what we almost might call the paranoid sensitivity to making sure that even if the other person is happy to keep seeing you as a therapist, you still want to give them something really useful and valuable and life-changing. And if you start to feel that it's changing, it's like no matter how much they convince you, there's a healthy paranoia that says, no, I have to give them something practical or there will be a backlash. There will be a karmic backlash, even in the sense that I'm spending time helping them instead of helping somebody else when maybe somebody else needs my help more. Mm-hmm. Even just that, as simple as that. It's like there's like this feeling of we only have so much time to work off our karmic debt in some sense. And so the funny thought experiment is to imagine all of the right angle and left angle profiles, right? These are the different ones, the different profiles. And the right angle are the ones that are here. They're kind of like the 1-3 up through the 4-6. They're here to have a very personal experience. And they're really here to just do whatever they are guided to do without others doing it for them. So if they need to make money, then they'll figure out a way to make money, and that's part of their learning. And if we make money for them, we kind of rob them of the experience of that. Well, we're all fifth line personalities. Like the sixth line personality, we're the left angle. We're almost like the administration. And what that means is like, for us, we're not robbing each other of the experience of earning money if we help each other out. We're not robbing each other of the experience of figuring it out for ourselves if we give each other the answer, or something like that. Like, what it basically means is the goal for us isn't to have had our own personal life experience of discovery through our own personal process of discovery. Our goal is to actually, you could almost imagine us as the purveyors of help to others, in the same way that 5-2, 6-2s, and 6-3s kind of are. They're all the left angles. The purveyors of sort of, we're here to help those who need us, and we help each other as left angles helping each other because we're not robbing each other of anything. And then we're kind of at the service of the right angles when they come to us, and for them, they just need something. They're in a crisis, they're having a problem, or they come to a sixth line and they just need objective perspective, that they need a reality check, they need an outside view. I mean, whatever it is, the left angle is kind of here to be of service to the right angle. So what's funny is if you look at Ra's material on incarnation sequencing and reincarnations, you'll see that, and it makes sense mathematically, we have more right angle lives than left angle. So it's almost like we have a few lives where we don't really have to worry about paying off our debt. We don't have to do the dishes, so to speak. We don't have to like be of service to others as much. We kind of just get to do whatever we want. And sometimes we make life-changing work, like Carl Jung changed the world in his right angle. It's not that we don't give back to the world. It's just that he had all these patients coming and he was basically testing out his theories on them. You have patients and your concern is their health and you're trying to make a positive impact in their life. It's a very different thing. He was like, let's see if my theory comes true, It
was based on him and his theory instead of let me help this
research.
person.
Exactly. And on his search and his journey. And it did ultimately give back. It was beneficial to humanity. It was just the benefit was almost the story that he created. And we're more the collectors of stories. Yeah, we have a pretty wild life story. People love to make up life stories about us. But ultimately, it's fairly mundane in the most part. I mean, and so we have this funny, larger-than-life thing. Ooh, a special guest. The return of a very special guest.
We need another chair.
We need one more chair. We have Nancy on. We're doing...
I'll sit over you.
Okay. We're doing the fifth line projection field.
So you had said that Ross said that we have more right lines than.
Well, he didn't even really say. It's just the mathematics of it. So what it is it's not even really. Yeah, I guess I can turn this again. So it's not even really that he said as much as there's mathematical formulas that just follow one incarnation to the next, and they're actually really cool formulas. If you look on the Rave Mandala, and you basically, and you can all find, I mean, this is really esoteric side of human design, but yes, you have the Rave Mandala here, perfect. Yeah, and we have this here as well. So what we have is basically you're born like with your personality sun here, gate 62. And so what we have is from here, there'll be different formulas depending what base you are, but like the base 2 formula, it'll go, your next life will be 180 degrees, and then 88 degrees, and then 100, and then 88, and then 100, and then 88.
Wow.
And it kind of does this zigzag around, and then if you look at what the profiles are, you just get to iterate through a bunch of the profiles, and when you kind of add them up, you're like, oh, I guess it kind of makes sense. There are more right angles than left angles. It makes sense. You almost like get almost like a 2-for-1. You get a few lives of just getting to kind of find out and do whatever you want and explore, and you're basically paid for. And then there's the life where you have to pay it back. It's because it was kind of debt. It's almost like, how much did you accumulate? How much debt did you accumulate? Or you put it the other way around. You look at the left angle life. We are accumulating such a savings account. Maybe Jung had a left angle life. Then he came back as Jung. He was married to the second richest woman in all of Switzerland and never had to work a day in his life, and was able to just spend his whole life doing what he really wanted to do as an experimental psychologist. So, I mean, that's kind of, there's two different ways to look at it. You're either like, we're working off the karma of our past lives, or we're building up a credit account for future excursions as a right angle, where we kind of get this big payment account because we've helped so many people and had such a big positive effect on people's lives. And that's the same for the 6-2 and the same for the 6-3. I mean, these 6th line personalities as well, they're not here to help in times of crisis, but they're here to help with transition, which is here to help people deal with change, which is one of the most important things you can ever do, right? So it's a different kind of help, but it's still very helpful. But I think some of the questions you were having were basically like, how do you deal with the projection field? How do you deal with people's expectations?
Right,
like
and how, I guess, that there's that whole thing that people project on us, like they call it the savior thing, right? So that you come in and they're like, oh, you're going to save me, and for a while, being unconscious of it in my, as I was younger, I didn't quite get it. And then I started understanding it and going, oh, yeah, will you stay in relationship with me? I'll be your savior. And then it would be a shit show. And because I wasn't and I couldn't actually continue living up to their expectation of me. And then it was this anger and rage at me for not being able to do it. So it was just kind of a shit show all the way around. And now I realize that people are going to do that for me. And so I want to mitigate it so that it doesn't continue being this bubble. And so I guess that's the thing where I'm at right now, because I've had some people like really project this energy on me that I was like the one, and it was a friendship, and it was crazy. So it's like, the question is, do I have to be extra clear about my intentions in order for this to not become the...
No, that doesn't work at all. I mean, I think we always kind of suspect that anyway as a 5th line that it's not going to work. I think the answer is really, there's a couple of things. One is the aura mechanics of being a manifester. It's so interesting how much misplaced anger can come out of that, where you're actually not even being angry, but because you're carrying certain channels, there's only 4 channels really in human design that can create this chemistry of anger. And a manifester usually has one of those 4. Sometimes there are certain, you have the 4521. So
I do.
Yeah. But in other cases, there will be manifestors that, like Ra actually, that didn't have a direct manifestor channel. He only had projector channels, but because it was still a motor to the throat, he still had a manifestor aura. Regardless of that, there's going to be aura mechanics where certain times you just have to leave, and that leaving is really healthy for everyone, and knowing when to leave and being able to leave and being able to walk away, even with an undefined solar plexus. There'll be a pressure to stay. A lot of the openness causes pressure, right? Like the undefined solar plexus could be pressure not to hurt someone. All these things. but basically just honoring your actual need as a manifester to protect your peace and to leave that situation, and then you'll actually have this powerful impact of ultimately making a peaceful situation. But it's by knowing when to leave, and it's basically just that even attempting to stay and talk is kind of going against that nature, like
Against
even
my own
against
nature.
your own nature. It's like betraying yourself because you're trying to get them to understand and to see the point or to learn something or this or that. And ultimately, I mean, there are these very difficult situations where you get to an impasse with somebody. But I think, I guess as a fifth line, the most important thing in your role for them is simply what can you give them that can help them. Now, as a person, there's a separate situation, which is simply that you're going to have certain people that, you might have past life karma with these people that you need to work out in some way, and it may require having a relationship with them, and this and that has nothing to do with your sort of professional public role as a fifth line. For that, actually, we have a whole area of human design analysis where we look at the tribal roles for relationships. And the fifth line tribal role is actually the executor, like the executor of their estate, doing their taxes, helping them manage their life, helping them get their life together. So if you're really in a deep relationship with someone, you're probably just naturally already helping them with all of these like mundane tasks that are not even really that exciting. They're kind of just the stuff they need to do, like helping them deal with all of the practical day-to-day aspects of their life. And I know that's something that I just kind of notice as, I mean, it's almost, you almost don't notice unless you're looking for it, because it's such an invisible way that the fifth line helps. But I think that really does a lot to mitigate it, where it's kind of, you're either in two phases. Either you haven't had that deep level of tribal bonding where you're so enmeshed with them that you're like helping them with their business license and all their taxes and all of their stuff. And in which case, if you haven't had that, then you haven't really bonded. If you have, then there is the question of how do you amicably change that bond. Maybe you break it, or maybe you start being friends, or you take time apart, or whatever. Maybe you have to leave that person and not see them anymore. Who knows what the future will hold? But that is a difficult thing for the fifth line, because there is sort of this paranoia, healthy paranoia even, of wanting to make sure the other person, that you're in their good graces, so they don't just go around destroying your reputation with everyone.
Exactly.
And also
Like
because as transpersonal people, we are here to help others, and we don't want to leave it in some negative situation where they have some negative sense about us or something like that. I mean, we do want to keep things in a good place. It is important to us. We're invested in the transpersonal, which means the connection with others. And so it's harder for us to leave things in a bad way, even though we sometimes have to just accept that we've done everything we can. So it's difficult, though. I'd love to hear any other experiences, of these kinds of issues. And also from Mike, he's off screen, but if he has any comments on noticing fifth lines. I mean, there's kind of a reputation for fifth line drama in relationships, which is so funny. Like, why is that? I mean, you'd think it would be opposite. You'd think fifth lines would just be like the most practical, down to earth, kind of no drama. I mean, it's weird. It's weird that there's such a reputation, at least in online communities, of fifth lines, there's going to be drama around stuff. I think maybe it's just the kind of larger than life thing that, especially when there are multiple fifth lines involved, there can just be. It's like we're not immune to having expectations about each other either. We might have some sympathy for each other because we understand that we're all under so much pressure to kind of perform and so on. But ultimately, I mean, I think, when a lot of fifth lines get together, it's not like it's any easier. Maybe it is just kind of, it can be, I mean, it can definitely be nice to have other fifth lines around that you can communicate with, where you don't really, I kind of feel like being, even just with left angle in general, like hanging out with it, like with Mike as a 6-2, I don't think it's that different. I just noticed the biggest difference being the left angle ultimately, because the left angle, I have this sense of we can enjoy each other's company without really being concerned about the experience the other's getting. Kind of like if you ask me for money, if anyone asked me to help out money, anything, I wouldn't think twice about it. I just help. on the left angle. But when it comes to the right angle, I assess the person and I kind of think about, well, this person has borrowed a bunch of money from people that they haven't paid back, and they've, or something like that. Like, obviously I'll still help them out if they really need it, and if I think that's the best thing for them. Maybe they're an incredible writer and they want to get their first book published. Yeah, sign me up, I'll give them a check. But if I think that they're being irresponsible and it's not healthy for them to kind of be supported in their irresponsibility, but that doesn't even cross my mind with the left angle, because it's kind of like the left angle is just so karmic and interpersonal, and it always kind of comes back around. We're kind of like all on, team something or other, team, we're on like some helper team that basically,
Right.
like for Ra, he was able to give this guy a free place to stay for quite a while, and then later when Ra had no money, that guy gave him a free place to stay. That's where he had his encounter with the voice. The whole thing karmically worked out, and that's just kind of how our lives work. So, and I'm not saying that I overly scrutinize, like, should I give money to the right angle person who asks me something like that? More just in general, I kind of just think about it in a different way. Like when someone who's right angle comes to me and says, I want your help doing this, and they present to me a goal, I think about whether it's a good goal or not. But if James comes to me and says, Jonah, I'm doing this thing, would you help me with that? No problem. Yeah, I just don't even think about it. Yeah, he's a 5'1". Yeah, or if Rachel, or if you can, because there's just a sort of assumption that we're trying to do something that it's like, give me the energy to help me do the thing that I'm trying to do to help other people. Whereas the right angle is ultimately, give me the energy to do the thing to have my life experience. And maybe they need to have the life experience of working hard for that money. Maybe if I gave that to them, it would rob them of that experience. Like, it's so much more important that they get their experience of doing it themselves, and also that they have nobody else to blame but themselves if it doesn't go out the right way that they had hoped for. They're really given a chance in this life, and that was something Ra was clear on, was that, I love his quote, no choice doesn't mean no chance, which is kind of like this idea, like, we're given a chance in life to really do something. What the right angle's given a chance to do is to see for themselves through their own discovery process if there's anything there. They think there might be So, Ra's a 5'1". That's a really interesting example. But if you look at Jung being right angle, each of them, Jung developed all of archetypal psychology. I mean, an incredible system. You have really two very different things, where everything that Ra was doing was trying to create these formulas that you could apply and kind of adapt to use in your own life in a very direct way. Jung was really seeing how far his exploration could go. Like, how far could he take these concepts that he was developing? How far could he take his deep dive into the psyche, into alchemy, into the history of mysticism, into all of these esoteric texts? And he took it extremely far. I mean, it was amazing how far it went. But it was kind of like his project, like almost like his pet project or his beloved project. Jung now. Now, Ra, human design was a project, but it was also kind of a curse. He talked about many times how it was this duty that he just felt like he had to do it because he was the only one equipped to do it, and he had tried to destroy it various times but wasn't able to, and all of these things. So it's like a little bit different. It's like one has this passion to see how far something goes and to discover for himself how far it goes. The other, Ra, was like, here's human design. I know how far it goes. I know what it is. I guess now I have to give it to other people. And that was so much other oriented. And really for Ra, his own personal passion was his music and playing guitar. Like, if he were a right angle, he would have just been a musician. I'm convinced he totally would have just been a musician. I also love making music, and that is something that I do, but a lot of what I do is so interpersonal, and it's like the music isn't needed as much as other things. So yeah.
So the projection field, is that something that that we have to learn to navigate? Is that something that we also use to project out onto others, ideas that might not even be about them? Does everybody use the projection field? Is it more just for 5'1"s? What is this projection field thing?
Do you have an answer for that one?
I think a lot of what I feel is a lot of projection is what people see in them. Like, they don't see this in themselves, but they'll see it in me. Right. So it's kind of like this weird reflection. So that's a kind of a way of looking at the projection field. One way of looking at the projection field. Another thing I do think is 5'1"s do have a tendency to also do some projecting.
Yes.
Also kind of a little more, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
Or they can.
I think there's 3 usages of the term projection, and I really love Jung, and I love Jung's disciple von Franz, who really pointed out that the first understanding of projection we have to, so she kind of uses, she describes basically projection is the projection of an inner psychic content onto
someone else.
an outer,
Right.
an outer, or even like, for instance, the alchemists projected their inner psychic realities. Like, I feel like I'm being crushed onto the planet Saturn. Saturn is crushing me, and it is the element of lead, and I feel a lead on me. So it's kind of like projecting emotional states into physical matter as well. But then she went on to say that it's used somewhat ambiguously in psychology, because someone might say, okay, this guy has a new partner, and he's telling all his friends she's an amazing singer. And people might say, well, he's projecting on her. And what von Franz points out is, yes, there's a primary projection of his anima, his inner feminine complex, or what he imagines a woman could be. He projects that onto her, or she captures that projection. She attracts that projection and sort of captures it. But then there's a secondary negative sense of projection, which means almost like she isn't the real thing. She's just a fake. And von Franz said, for that, you have to actually listen. If you listen to this woman and she's off key and you can't stand her way of singing, but if you admit that even if it's not to your taste, she's a good singer, then no projection has occurred. And so we actually have to be a little more realistic about, or like, I guess, primary and secondary projection, the 2 senses. I think what Rob said actually sounds more like primary projection, because he said that the second line is an attempt of projecting an image of themselves out to the world. They say, this is what I am, and they try to show up kind of, maybe they're really cool or interesting or appealing in some way, or kind of, they're presenting themselves in an almost affected, crafted image. Then he says the 5th line is the refinement of this, where they no longer are the paper tiger, but they can actually deliver. But they've refined this crafted image of themselves, carefully crafted and presented to the world, even if they're not even aware of the fact they're carefully crafting it. Something about it, like selected intelligently. Like, it doesn't mean that you're always going to dress up, because dress up might make people uncomfortable. Maybe you dress down in a way to make them more comfortable, or disarm them,
Or make myself
or
more
make yourself
comfortable.
more comfortable, so
Like,
that you
I'm
can,
like,
or to make them notice. Maybe, the interesting thing would be like piercings, tattoos, anything like that. Many 5th lines will have, like, I'm actually kind of risking it without having something. Usually I would have a hat. So we're kind of like risking it in our not having enough to really distract the focus, like we were saying
interesting.
earlier.
I've got lots.
Well,
of
that's great. I
distractions.
mean, as a 5th line, that's good, because that helps to produce this effect where, I mean, and so did Ra. He would always wear hats. He'd always have interesting kind of things, slogans to kind of distract you. It's really just that sense of projection is what the 5th line is doing, is crafting an image of themselves that gives others something to hook onto. They can imagine all sorts of stories about your tattoos, and
Yes,
stories about your
they
piercings.
do,
They
right.
can wonder what other tattoos you have, or what other piercings,
yeah.
or all sorts of imagination is kind of stirred by by this crafted image. So I think that's what the 5th line is here to do in that way, and that's a healthy thing, because it, like I was saying earlier, the connection to the spirit and the experiential, it kind of gives others hope that there's something exciting in the world, and gives them something for that primary projection, the archetypal projection, to kind of hook onto. Now, the secondary projection, you can solve my problems, that may or may not be true. Right? Because the primary projection is more just like, this is an interesting person that stirs my imagination. That's just like, this is an archetypal, imaginal, sort of larger than life figure that I'm interested in, and now I'm kind of stimulated and going, wow, like, the world is an interesting place. It's full of interesting people. And that's the primary projection that sort of wakes something up. But once that interest happens, then there can be, oh, you're the best singer I've ever heard. Well, you better be a good singer. So... and that's the difficulty then, is once those secondary projections build up, and I think that just has to do with selecting the right people, because with the right people in your life, they will project expectations on you that you can fulfill. And with the wrong people, that you can. Yeah. And the wrong people are just going to project kind of dumb expectations. I mean, sorry to put it that way so bluntly, but I think we're actually really relieved at how smart some people can be when we're like, oh, wow, you really had well-adjusted, healthy expectations for that situation. That's incredible. Like, what a relief. Like that's like, it's a big turn on for 5-1s, I guess, right? Healthy expectations.
Healthy expectations.
But I mean, this is why Ra, was monogamous for 25 years and just had a very simple life and very simple long-term relationships and things like that. It's like, he didn't need to have, it's like, and also once you find somebody that is a good person in your life, that does have healthy expectations of you, and that is almost smart enough to see what you're doing and stay out of your way and help you in it in other ways and things like that. Like, it does require a certain intelligence. It's not like it's easy to figure out how best to help a 5-1 or a manifestor or a lot of other configurations too. There's certain, or a 45-21 where you kind of have to have your own monarchy and so on. So, I mean, there's a lot of things where just having the right people around, it's almost magical how they will, it really shows you how intelligence is so much more than just the mind or talking or thinking. Like, we kind of assume intelligence is thinking. It's not. It's like, so much of it is like observing and noticing and like knowing how to act in different situations and how to be helpful and not get in the way and not have like wrong expectations of someone or unhealthy expectations. Like, there's so many different ways to be intelligent, and I think that's something the 5th line really values. And that's why when we find somebody we like, we end up just being monogamous and staying with them because it's practical and it works, and we don't really need to have, it's like we can have very mundane, simple lives so that we can be totally wild and crazy in other people's imaginations and in the in the kind of imaginary. So it's like this nice corollary. Any experiences you'd like to share? Final experiences of being a 5th line projection field?
Just maybe sharing a few stories. When I was in high school, I used to kind of dress in outfits that I'd find at the thrift store. My mom always would, threaten me with taking a picture of me every day, which I wish she would have now. But and so it was like some costume that I was naturally putting on to go to school. And then one other time, I was kind of exploring going to the Pike Place Market and just like seeing if I could go through the market and not have people like see me, and just be this like invisible kind of entity. As a young woman, I was noticed a lot. So then going in there in this moment was another experience, and it worked. People were bumping into me and they didn't even see me. It was kind of great.
That's kind of interesting. Yeah, I mean, I guess, the 5th line can be weirdly invisible in that way too. It's like, we will stand out and have the larger than life projections, but there is also this need to stay behind the curtain until the time is right. And so there is kind of a binary. There are these phases where we're like, kind of just need some space to develop things more. And actually, one of the interesting keynotes, when you look at the 5th line in its keynotes, you can look at it at the level of the collective, where it's the general, saving the day and kind of leading the charge, or as I mentioned, tribally, where it's the executor helping the other person with their finances and practical matters. But then the 5th line, actually at an individual level, one of its keynotes is stamina. People don't realize that when the 5th line isn't on stage and kind of in front of everybody, which is maybe like 5% of the time, the other 95% of the time, they have stamina. And stamina is just the day in, day out, constant work. I mean, that's the other funny thing is being a 5th line is like, it doesn't matter if you're a manifestor or a projector or whatever energy type, it's going to require so much stamina and perseverance behind closed doors to just keep going on all the projects that you have that people never even see. And so it's so funny that it's like, it's such an important thing when we do kind of meet the public or meet the other, that we help them and we provide these practical solutions. And then what do? We go back and work. We actually go back, and it's like, now that we've finished helping them, you would think like they all kind of imagine that's the work. They're kind of like, so you guys like work 5% of the time and the rest of the time you're just hanging out? No, we're working 95% of the time. We take a break to help you. Like, that's what we're doing. I mean, it's such a funny thing though, because the stamina is just the constantly developing, constantly working on things, constantly planning, and just doing all the preparation. Like I was saying earlier about part of the yin is being receptive to what's needed by that era in history. And so to really be receptive to what's needed takes a lot of stamina to constantly kind of keep up with everything. And so it really is all this work. It's like people see us kind of step on stage, save the day, and step off stage. But what they don't realize is that backstage, we have had so much stamina just working day in, day out for that opportunity to actually be prepared to step on stage and save the day. So it really is this kind of constant effort, sharpening of the sword, developing new skills, developing new things to give people and new ways to help people, new things to do. I mean, it's really a constant developmental process. We have 3 5 lines in the house here, plus the 2 5. So we got a lot of fifth lines in this household. Well, should we wrap up, or are we feeling good about it? Thank you so much for attending, Nancy, and for being our audience for today. And we will have some more Signpost events soon. I'm excited to develop some new things. We're going to keep doing this on Mondays, and you're always welcome to come. We also might move this to Krista's house if she wants to. I haven't confirmed with her. But for now, we're doing it every Monday at my place. And I'll be a little more set up next time to have people over. And then Mike is theoretically doing Tuesdays as well, but that's kind of an ad hoc, more of a newbie thing. And I don't know if you're a newbie anymore. I don't think you can be you can't be. You've been way too deep in this for too long. So I think, but we're going to keep doing Mondays. And then I have some new exciting programming in the works for Signpost as well, which I'm really excited about. So thanks for sticking around, Nancy, and everyone else who tunes in. And we'll do more soon.
Great, thank you.
Bye.
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 Yay.